Ladies and gentlemen, today we are here to talk about my favorite horror franchise of all time, the Final Destination movies. We're going to be talking about all six, including Bloodlines, and we're going to be ranking them from worst to best. I just got done watching and reviewing Bloodlines. I have the spoiler-free review up on my channel if you want to see the score I gave that movie. That video is spoiler-free, but this one, major spoiler warnings for really the entire franchise. We're going to be talking about everything. Now, I already know there's going to be extremely controversial placements on this list. Some people, maybe many, are not going to agree with it. But what I love about this series is how everyone seems to have a different favorite film and their own unique ranking. I've seen so many people rank these movies from their least favorite to their most, and all these rankings are so varied and different. There's not a strong general consensus on, okay, this is the good one, this is the mid one, and the rest kind of suck. No, you go on Twitter or you go on Reddit or YouTube, and nobody's list is the exact same. And I think that makes this series really fun to talk about. Not every horror franchise can say damn near every movie in it could be the fan favorite one or considered the cult status one. And I think that shows the quality of these movies. Yes, they are silly, campy, ridiculous, loud, but they are quality camp nonetheless. They don't work for everybody, but they do work for me. Well, most of them work for me. There's one that's absolute dog shit, which we're actually gonna talk about right now. Ladies and gentlemen, let's go ahead and officially get started. At number 6 and dead last, I have The Final Destination from 2009, directed by David R. Ellis, starring Bobby Campo and Chantel Van Santen. You know how a moment ago I said that most people have different rankings and there's an argument for almost each film to be the fan favorite? Well, if there ever was a strong general consensus about anything in this franchise, it would be that this movie, The Final Destination, Final Destination 4, is straight up ass. And that's a sentiment I wholeheartedly agree with. Out of all these films, this is the only one I would consider like terrible. This is a bad movie. And it's bad for multiple reasons. We can talk about the horrible acting from everybody involved. And the thing is, the Final Destination movies aren't known for their quality acting. It's pretty inconsistent. In fact, if anything, it's pretty consistently bad for the most part, but we'll get into that as we talk about the rest of the films. But it's crazy to say that it really stands out in this one. The acting is pure dog shit. We can also talk about the characters, all of them being extremely unlikable or annoying or boring or just forgettable. Same with the kills. The kills for the most part are just forgettable and lackluster. The fact that this movie has the ugliest, most disgusting, horribly aged VFX I've ever seen in any of these movies. And that's due to the fact that this movie was shot for a 3D experience. You know that mid to late 2000s era when Hollywood is really into that whole 3D phase? Well, a lot of those 3D movies have aged like milk, VFX wise, and Final Destination 4 is a perfect example of that. And that's unfortunate to say because apparently this movie did use a lot of practical effects, but they just got buried in the most dated CGI you've ever seen. And I don't want to hear, oh, it's on TV, it's on TV. You're being unreasonable. The movie came out 2009. Yeah, 2009. We're not talking about the 80s here, buddy. And even if we were, there are movies from the 80s, from the 70s, from the 60s that look better than this dog shit. It's on TV. Those movies contain more practical. Enough. I've heard enough. Practical effects, CGI, 3D. Bottom line is, this movie's VFX in general has aged horridly, and that's a con. This is not King Kong from the 1930s where I have to put into context of the technology of the era. This movie, the effects for it to age as bad as it has in the last 2 decades, less than 2 decades, mind you, that's embarrassing. And if we're being honest, it didn't even take 2 decades. 5 years later, by like 2015, it was already noticeably bad. And like I said, that's embarrassing. Worst effects in the series by far, worst characters by far, my god. But I think at this point, these points, no pun intended, are low-hanging fruit. These are the main reasons why most people dog on this movie a lot more than the others, and they're valid reasons, I agree with them. But before we move on to the next film, I want to talk about my biggest gripe with The Final Destination. And that is, this movie has no gimmick. See, every FD movie follows the exact same premise for the most part. There's a protagonist that has a premonition of a disaster. That protagonist convinces a few people to leave the area of said disaster. Disaster happens, the protagonist and the characters that they saved survive, obviously, but they cheated death. And death does not like to be cheated, so one by one our characters are killed in the most random, absurd ways possible. You got somebody getting hit by a truck going a million miles per hour, you got a random brick falling on somebody, or they could have their head decapitated via an elevator door. Regardless of the process, they're all doomed. But there's usually a unique gimmick in each film, a subplot if you will, that keeps the story afloat, that keeps the scenes in between the kills interesting. For instance, in part 3, the photos, Wendy, our protagonist, takes pictures of all of our characters before the disaster happens, and after the disaster happens and death comes for them one by one, Wendy starts to notice that in the photos, some of them give hints of who's gonna die next and how they can possibly die. That's interesting. In part 2, the baby, there was a pregnant lady who survives the disaster, so now it offers the idea, if she lives long enough to give birth, can a new life throw off death's plan? Can it mess up the pattern and possibly save everybody else? Okay, that's interesting. Part 5 to me has the best gimmick of them all, which we'll talk about once we get to part 5. Bloodlines has the family gimmick. Even part 1, you can consider the FBI subplot the gimmick. But there's nothing in part 4. Absolutely nothing. It's just the premise, and with its weak ass kills, it's just such a boring movie. You can maybe call the visions the gimmick, the subplot, but it's just so weak and underdeveloped and uninteresting, especially compared to the other subplots, that I find it really difficult to call it the gimmick, the subplot. It adds nothing to the story. It goes absolutely nowhere, and that's another thing about this movie. Writing wise, it feels so dry and soulless. Obviously, it's a quick cash grab sequel, but it still loses the magic that the other sequels bring to the table. Easily the weakest installment in the franchise. Again, the deaths are just boring and not creative. The pool one is probably the most memorable, but that's it. I can't reiterate how unlikable the characters in this movie are. The main cast sucks, the side characters suck, there's literally a Nazi character. I'm talking swastika and all. And he's also confirmed to be in the KKK, so, you know, there's a 2-for-1 combo right there. Now, thankfully, he dies fairly quickly. Okay, we don't stay with him for, you know, not too long. And he dies in a very ironic but Looney Tunes-esque way. It comes off as very silly. I'm pretty sure that was the point of his death. It was supposed to come off silly, but it's stupid. I think his only lines of dialogue were, he calls a black guy the N-word, hard R, and then immediately after, like his next line of dialogue is, he calls him chocolate. Deadass, I think those are the only 2 lines he has in the whole film, so. What are we doing? I don't know what it was with studios back in the day, especially in the 2000s for horror movies. They had this idea of, let's make our characters really gross to just listen to and look at, and just make them have the most ugliest, most pessimistic personalities of all time. Maybe then, when we start killing them off one by one, our audiences will love that. Which I don't even want to go into why that's such a stupid, borderline psychopathic way of thinking. This movie gives me a headache. Worst one in the series. Let's move on. Okay, so coming in at number 5, this may not go over well with many of you, but I do have Final Destination from 2000, the original one, directed by James Wong, starring Devon Sawa and Ollie Larder. Okay, it's spelled Ollie, but she's a girl. I don't know if it's pronounced Allie. I'm just gonna call her Ollie. I said earlier that part 4 is the only bad movie in this franchise. I stand by that. Just because Final Destination is second to bottom on this list doesn't mean it's a bad film. I don't think it's a bad movie. I like this movie. I just like the other ones a bit more. In fact, if we're being honest, in 4th, 3rd, 2nd, 1st place, all those movies, they're really only like a hair difference away from, you know, being better than the other one. This is the film that sets off everything. We got the iconic premise, the whole premonition before disaster, the non-subtle omens, being hunted down one by death itself, how anything in the world in the right spot in the right time can just kill you. Such an iconic, fun, cool concept, all thanks to the original Final Destination. One of the cool, unique things about Final Destination 1 is that it takes itself a lot more serious than the other installments, and I really do like that aspect. And because it takes itself more serious, there are a few things about this one that just feel different than the others. For instance, the inciting incident, the airplane disaster, it genuinely feels eerie. See, where the other films in their beginning disasters, they kind of go for more of a jaw-dropping chaos, like a spectacle. In this one, the build-up and how the airplane eventually does go haywire, the way that it's filmed, it genuinely feels like a nightmare. Not necessarily in a chaotic way, but more in a dreadful, tragic sort of way. It could be my bias showing because of my natural fear of airplanes, but then again, I don't think so. I think they genuinely captured the very authentic feeling of confusion and chaos and dread. I know in the other movies, our protagonist also has that uneasy feeling before the disaster happens, but they make the omens in the other films very obvious. They make them so obvious to the point that when our character gets uneasy, we don't get uneasy. We kind of get excited in anticipation, like, oh shit, everything's about to get fucked up. But in this one, the omens aren't as in your face, and it just captures this feeling of uneasiness, and we feel as uneasy as the protagonist. Something's wrong, we're just not sure what it is. Like I said, it doesn't feel like a spectacle, it feels like a genuine airplane malfunction, and I think that's terrifying and awesome. Now that's the beginning disaster. The kills that come after that, let's be honest, they're not the best. Granted, I do know that this is the very beginning. I know that they just started. They didn't know how campy or how ridiculous the kills were gonna eventually become. They didn't have the FD formula, so to speak. But nonetheless, they are still pretty weak kills compared to the evolution that we eventually do get. The kills in this movie are, girl gets hit by a bus, knife falls into a lady's chest, which the buildup of that scene was pretty cool, but the finale of it, so to speak, was just The decapitation at the end was pretty cool, but that's mostly because of the prop work, like the practical effects. Seeing his head fly off was neat to see, but the buildup of that scene, the creativity of the kill itself, nothing special. But the seeds were definitely planted, and the movies would eventually build up off the concept of the kills and the creativity overall. Well, most of the movies would. Final Destination 4 would not do that because Final Destination 4 is ass. Final Destination 1 has a decent cast of characters. I know Alex and Clear are considered iconic at this point, which I get. They are the only interesting characters in this film. I didn't care for the comic relief character, what's his name? The white boy. I think Billy or Bobby, something like that. I also didn't care for the asshole jock whose entire character was being an asshole jock. Acting in this movie is kind of hit or miss. I think the actor who plays Alex is pretty good for the most part. Side note, he plays Stan in Eminem's Stan, which I was like, I knew I recognized him from somewhere. Where? Oh, that's Stan. The actress who plays Claire is... she's good in some moments, but in other moments...
That was the design for my father and my family? Then fuck death.
Yeah, so like I said, a bit hit or miss. Fuck death. I really did enjoy the FBI subplot in this movie. You would think that that kind of subplot would be, I don't know, more prevalent in all of the FD films. You know, if you got somebody on the airplane saying, hey guys, this airplane's gonna explode, y'all gotta get off, everybody's gonna die, and you kick him off because he's being strange and off-putting, 10 minutes later, the airplane does explode. Yeah, buddy, the FBI is gonna want to talk to you. Okay, we've been through 9/11. But I do understand why they don't have it in every single film. They probably don't want these movies to feel as repetitive as they may already do. So I get that. But the FBI subplot does make this film seem like the most grounded. I say that, however, simultaneously, it also feels like the most paranormal out of the bunch. This is the only Final Destination movie, I'm sure, like 99% sure, where death itself has a physical form. In all the other movies, death itself is usually just a gust of wind that sets off a chain of events leading to someone dying. In this movie, there are some shots where death appears as a little black cloud, which I don't know, I think it's kind of cute. It's like, oh, also there's a character who slips on water and hangs himself. Once he dies, the water magically retreats back into the pipes. So little bits like that were fun to see, where death comes off as more of a vengeful entity rather than nature itself trying to correct its errors, trying to correct its wrongs. No matter how much more serious this movie takes itself, the camp was there from the start. Overall, this is a horror classic. I found it very enjoyable. It is iconic. I just enjoy the other ones a bit more. Speaking of ones I enjoyed more, let's go ahead and talk about probably the most controversial placement on this list. In fourth place, I have Final Destination 3 from 2006, directed by James Wong, starring Mary Elizabeth Winstead and Ryan Merriman. Hear me out. Final Destination 3, is it the most iconic? Absolutely, without question. Do I like it? Yes, duh. Is it my favorite? No. In fact, I think it's a little bit overrated. When you think of the Final Destination movies, you probably think of this one. This is the Final Destination movie. It's got the roller coaster deaths, the tanning bed kills, which we will talk about in a second. You got Wendy as the main character. This one's a banger. Only reason why it's so quote-unquote low on this list is because, like I've been saying, I just enjoy the other ones a bit more, and I'll explain why. But for Final Destination 3, for this one, quality-wise, I think it should be the standard for the entire franchise. It is a solid installment. It's got a great blend of creativity with the kills and an interesting subplot that actually keeps the story afloat. Subplot being the pictures that Wendy takes are actually the omens that helps her figure out who's gonna die next and how they can possibly die. That banger concept. The cast of characters actually being likable, specifically the main two. I think Wendy, the main protagonist, is probably, I'm not even gonna say probably, she is the best protagonist in the series. The reason why I think Wendy's the best protagonist in the series is because she feels authentic. You sympathize with her a lot more than a lot of the other characters, and that's mostly thanks to Mary Elizabeth Winstead. She is a real actress. I've said throughout the video that Final Destination has pretty inconsistent acting. That's putting it nicely. There's a lot of bad acting in these movies. Not from Mary Elizabeth Winstead. She is an actual actress. She shits on most of the actors in this franchise. Her crying is believable, her panics are believable, and her sincere moments are believable. All this put together makes her a solid MC. The side characters are pretty good too. I enjoyed the emo couple. The bimbos were really sweet, which I thought was funny. The Frankie character, he could go die. I didn't enjoy him all that much. You know, he is that standard 2000s kind of douchebag, rapey vibes type of characters that just fails to be funny. Product of the time, those characters did not age well. I'm not offended by them. They're just kind of icky and gross, and again, like I said, not funny. There's also that meathead gym guy who was there, I guess, he existed. The roller coaster disaster is really fun, and so far, I do think in the entire franchise, on paper, it's the coolest concept for a disaster. However, in execution, it was still good, but some of the digital shots haven't aged all that well. However, that's more of a minor nitpick because it's not nearly as prevalent as it is in part 4, thank fucking God. I would say it's a solid opening sequence. It's definitely the most iconic, but like I said, not my favorite. In fact, there are 2 other disasters, I would say, maybe even 3 at this point, that kind of wash it. But let me go ahead and give Final Destination 3 its props before somebody thinks I'm hating. The best thing about this movie is the ending. It's got damn near the best ending in the series. Only problem with the ending, again, minor nitpick, but this one I think is important to state, is the final minute. I genuinely think if they took out the last minute of this film, it would be a perfect ending. For those who don't remember, the movie ends with Wendy and the last 2 remaining characters dying in the train disaster. They all die screaming in a very violent, chaotic train wreck. It's pretty bleak and hopeless, yet awesome for your horror movie. After the train disaster, Wendy survives, but you see one more train coming to kill her. As soon as it kills her, it wakes her up, snaps her out of the vision. What we just witnessed was just a premonition of what's to come. And that last minute is our characters on that train before it crashes, realizing that it's too late, that they can't stop the train from actually crashing. And it ends with the screen going black and you hear the train crash happen. Now, I may have described it in a cool way, but guaranteed the movie would have ended on such a better note, in my opinion, if the last shot was the train coming towards Wendy and then instant black screen. It may sound like a small pet peeve, and it really is, but in my opinion, if you're gonna waste the last minute of the movie showing us that it's just a premonition, but they're gonna die anyways, why not just make it feel more finalized? Why not just, instead of showing us the premonition, just show us the death? Fuck the premonition, just show us the actual disaster. That feeling of hopelessness was kind of snapped out of me when it showed us the premonition. I know the premonition still hints at, hey, they're gonna die anyways, but there is a difference with that final shot and sort of blue balling us, giving us whiplash. Boom, they're actually still alive, but they're about to die. Still a great ending nonetheless. It's top 2, but it's not top 1. Now let's talk about the kills in this movie because they sort of fluctuate in quality. Like some of them are really good with the needle gun kill, but some of them are kind of with the gym kill. But Final Destination 3 does have easily the best kill, the best, most brutal death in the whole series. The tanning bed death. You knew it was coming. Let me lay this out for you because this is peak cinema. We got these 2 bimbos who are laying in their tanning beds. They're topless, so the scene is already a 10 out of 10. They're listening to music, they're getting their jammy jams on, and then the buildup happens. You know the FD formula, a gust of wind comes out, a cup of water spills on a electrical cord, and then something happens, someone dies. Well, that buildup happens in this scene, one thing leads to another, and the tanning beds start to malfunction. They start overheating, and as they're rising in temperature, this giant plank of wood lands perfectly in between the tanning beds, essentially blocking them inside. They cannot get out of the tanning beds. As they are now basically trapped, the tanning beds get so hot that they literally start boiling them. The girls start screaming, their skin starts to bleed and blister. It's extremely visceral. The glass from the light bulbs within the tanning beds shatters and bursts. So now you got this glass just cutting them, and then they literally get set ablaze. Like verbatim, they're getting cooked. It is a very brutal, probably the most brutal death in the series. It feels quite long too. Visceral, like I said, and creative. The best death in the series by far. It almost feels like blasphemy to put this movie at number 4, but trust me, I think I have some good explanations as to why I put the other ones a bit higher. Iconic, great movie nonetheless. Let's move on to number 3. Alright, hold on. Oh, hold on. Scissor. Alright. So, my camera that I'm recording this video on, it actually died, and I decided, you know what? I'm gonna take this as a sign. This is an omen. I can't do this video right now. I'm going on about my day. So I went on about my day. I hit the gym, I ate, I showered, shaved. It is about to be 3 o'clock in the morning. I could not sleep, so I decided, you know what? Let me put on the exact same fit, shout out SZA, and just finish this fucking video. Ladies and gentlemen, we got 3 more movies to talk about. Hit that subscribe button. Be a part of the Swans TV family before we reach 1,000 subs, and help me hit 1,000 subs. Let's do this, okay? Coming in at number 3, I got Final Destination 5 from 2011, directed by Stephen Quayle, starring Nicholas D'Agosto and Emma Bell. I don't care what anyone says, this is easily the most underrated Final Destination movie of all time. This one's actually a banger. Now, this may be difficult to justify because, I'm gonna be honest, this could straight up just be my bias showing. As weird as this may sound, this is a childhood favorite of mine. This was the first FD film I ever watched, and I rewatched it probably about, if I had to guess, 30 to 40 times, and 99% of those times were all in middle school. I've seen it so many times it got to the point where, even though I haven't rewatched it or even thought about it in like a decade, I rewatched it for the first time in a long time last week. When I rewatched it, I remember damn near every line of dialogue. It just came all rushing back to me like I was a sleeper agent. But even from an unbiased standpoint, I do think that this movie does do several things that are really good, especially for this franchise. First things first, let's talk about the inciting incident, the bridge collapse scene at the beginning of this film. Now, I'm not gonna sit here and say this is the best disaster scene in the whole franchise. What I am gonna say is, you watch the bridge collapse scene from part 5, and you watch the roller coaster disaster from part 3, watch them back to back, remove the word iconic from the English language, you tell me which one's better. It's the bridge collapse scene. It just has such a phenomenal blend of chaos and fun, crazy kills. The CGI, okay. Let's talk about the CGI. I think the CGI for the most part does still hold up. I know there are a couple shots of the VFX looking dated and quite bad, especially some of the kills, but I think for the most part it does look at least decent. The bridge actually falling apart into the water, that still does look good, and it still does and feel cinematic. There are a few deaths in this scene, really in the movie, that don't look, they could have looked better VFX wise, but nothing is prevalent as it is in part 4, so thank fucking God, because I think we all can agree part 4 looks like dog shit. Every single character that dies in this disaster dies in such a fun way. The first girl that falls off, you think she's gonna fall and either get killed by landing on the surface of the water from the height, but that'd be too realistic for Final Destination, oh shade. Or you think she's gonna somehow survive the fall and die like, somehow in the water, like something's gonna fall on her. Before she even lands on the surface of the water, she gets impaled by a fucking boat. You see her guts just spew on out, and it's like, okay, this is a Final Destination movie. The guy who dies in the bus, that is such a fun visual where he's laying on the windshield, and as the bus is falling, you see all the water just tear right through him. That every death there's effort and thought put into it. And oh, thank you, part 5. Thank you, because part 4 didn't show us that. That's all only discussing the bridge collapse scene. The kills that come after one by one, I think it's safe to say at this point, I think enough time has passed, we can call the kills in this scene iconic, or at least, at the very least, they should be iconic. The gymnasium spine snap scene, the spa scene, the laser eye surgery scene, these are all just visually, you remember them. You remember where you were when you watched them for the first time. After 10 years, this series is still showing us fun and imaginative ways people can brutally die by. And I think that's just fantastic. The characters are also fun. Unfortunately, there's still the rapey douchebag vibes type of character. There's the bimbo, but just like the other films, the bimbo is actually pretty cool. Really, the whole cast is either likable or at least standard. None of them are too annoying, besides, of course, the douchebag character. I really enjoyed the MC in this film. I say he's top 2. The character of Sam, who is our protagonist, he's right under Wendy as being the best protagonist in the whole series. And just like Wendy, I like him because the actor who plays him is actually really good at doing his job. He puts on a solid performance as the MC. He is authentic. You buy it. You believe him. But without a doubt, my favorite aspect of Final Destination 5 is the gimmick, the subplot. It introduces a rule that I think is so cool. That rule being, you can actually avoid death's inevitable crusade against you if you kill someone. If you take someone's life, you essentially take their remaining lifespan. How many ever years that they were supposed to have, they're now yours. I love that. I think that's just such an interesting premise. Unfortunately, I don't think that they did enough. I wish they did more with that because it offers so many questions and possibilities and storylines. Like, are you willing to take a random human being's life just to save your own? Is it even worth the gamble? Because what if the person's life you take, they had cancer and they were gonna die 2 weeks from now? Okay, so now you just took someone's life just to give yourself 2 weeks. Is that worth it? You have no idea how many years or months or weeks or even days, even hours someone else has. Is that gamble worth it? They don't expand on the premise as much as I would have hoped for, but they still use it to make an exciting climax, and it still is my favorite gimmick in the whole franchise just off of potential alone. And lastly, who can forget the legendary plot twist at the end of this film? It did absolutely nothing for the story, but boy was it fun. So throughout Final Destination 5, our 2 main characters, they've been talking about this trip to Paris that they've been wanting to go to. At the end of the movie, when they finally survive, they finally take that trip to Paris. They get on the plane. Once they board it and take their seats, they hear a ruckus amongst the passengers. They turn to see who's causing the ruckus, and who do we see? We see none other than Alex and the rest of the main characters from part 1, moments before the airplane disaster. This was a prequel to the very first film the entire time, all leading up to the very first inciting incident. And again, nothing really added or subtracted to the story, but it gave me the biggest, stupidest grin on my face just knowing how our characters are finally gonna die in this film. And sure enough, our 2 main characters die on that airplane. Awesome way to end your film. My favorite ending in the series. Just a hair over part 3. Alright, let's get back to it. Coming in at number 2, second place, I got Final Destination Bloodlines 2025, directed by Zach Lipovsky and Adam Steen, starring Caitlin Santawana and Tio Bryons. I always fuck those names up. Now, I'm not going to spend too much time on this one because I do already have a spoiler-free review up on the channel if you want to take a look at it, see the score I gave that movie. But the reason why I have this one so high up on the list, to put it shortly, this is the most fun I've ever had with any Final Destination film ever. This one has the best cast of characters by far. Everybody is so likable and full of personality and funny, and in this movie we're following a family, so it's also just refreshing to see new character dynamics, you know, like brother and sister, cousin and cousin, rather than slutty teenager and douchebag pervert friend. The gimmick of this movie being an entire bloodline is hunted by death because grandma was supposed to die in a disaster but didn't because of the premonition she has, thereby surviving and starting a family that was never supposed to be started from the get-go. That is a fun, interesting, sort of refreshing take on the Final Destination formula that I really enjoyed. It was a much needed breath of fresh air for this franchise, for this return. Everybody, and I mean everybody in the theater, loved the beginning disaster in the Sky Tower, including me. I mean, we all cheered when the piano fell and obliterated that little boy at the beginning. We all stood and we all clapped. But seriously, the slow buildup of the few tiny things going wrong, the editing along with the dancing and the singing, it was exciting. It felt like there was some momentum. It was such a great opening sequence. It felt like a roller coaster. Shout out part 3. Solid acting, solid pace, great kills, definition of a fun horror movie. If you want to know more details on why I like it so much, check out my spoiler-free review. But until then, let's move forward. Let's talk about my favorite Final Destination movie ever. Coming in at number 1, I do have Final Destination Part 2 from 2003, directed by David R. Ellis, starring AJ Cook and Michael Landis. That's right, folks, you heard that correctly. David R. Ellis, the same director of the worst Final Destination film of all time, he's also responsible for being the director of my favorite Final Destination movie of all time. I don't know how that works. Maybe the kid had it at one point and then he dropped the ball. Beats me. Final Destination 5 has my favorite ending, Bloodlines has my favorite cast of characters, and Part 3 has my favorite death. So why do I have Part 2 as my number 1 choice? Well, to put it simply, from opening sequence to the end credits, this is the perfect Final Destination movie. From the great cast of characters to the fun storyline and easily the most consistent top tier entertaining deaths in the whole franchise, I find it hard that they'll ever top this one. It's just so good. One of the few unsung qualities about this film that I wish a lot of the other movies did more are the interactions between the characters. The scenes where all the survivors get together and talk about what's going on and try to work together, but usually butt heads because it sounds too fucking freaky. Like, what do you mean we're all gonna die? Just because we survived some disaster, you're telling me regardless of us surviving, we're doomed? What are you talking about? I love scenes like that. It just adds more flavor, more substance to our characters, to the story overall. And do it more than one time. Don't just do it after the interrogation scene. Do it multiple times. Bloodlines does do that effectively, and that's also why it's one of my favorites. But Part 2 does it a bit better in my opinion. Especially because in Part 2, they're not a family. So these character interactions are pretty interesting. It adds a bit more flair because there's not that bloodline aspect. The possibility of them turning on each other or not believing each other or just infighting is just more prevalent because, again, like I said, that lack of bloodline. It's not just our protagonist goes to each character who dies one by one trying to warn them, but it's too late every single time. No, I really did enjoy this almost group effort, this team up that the movie has, especially in the second half. It offers more character interactions, make our characters a bit more interesting, and just keeps the story overall engaging. The acting is really good for the most part. There's one actress that's kind of hit or miss. And it's the main character. The actress who plays Kimberly, she felt right for the role. Like, she plays a very campy performance in a campy horror movie. But her co-star, the guy who plays the cop, he just does fucking laps around her, acting-wise. It's not camp. He is genuinely putting on a good performance. And it's almost whiplash when they're in the same scene together, which is most of the movie. They're the main two characters. And I'll stick by saying her acting is hit or miss because there are some scenes where she's good, but then there are some scenes where, but solid characters nonetheless. This is my second favorite cast of characters right behind Bloodlines. They have personality and they're not annoying. And sometimes that is all you need. The car collision scene at the beginning might just be the greatest disaster in the whole series. It's so chaotic and destructive. It's almost funny how over the top and destructive the scene is. Like, a car can hit another car on its side and it'll fucking explode like it got hit with an RPG. And the shot of the big tree log flying through the cop's windshield, coming out through the back, and all the blood and the guts. Cinema. That was badass. And that's another thing that this movie does really well. It still holds up. A lot of the kills still look great. This was right before CGI became a lot more prevalent. You do see bits of that in Part 3, and you see all of it, the vomit of it all, in Part 4. But in Part 2, there seems to be almost none. So you got these practical effects with no possibility of the CGI ruining it or staining it or making it age like milk. You got that along with the creativity of the writers saying, hey, let's make this Final Destination and all of the kills fucking crazy. perfect blend. Part 2 has the best kills in the whole series, bar none. Like, consistently, all of them are amazing. There's like 4 out of 5 or 6 that could be considered S tier. The dentist scene, the flying fence that cuts the dude into 3 pieces, the elevator scene, oh, top tier. If the tanning bed kills are my favorite deaths in the whole franchise, the elevator kill is top right there, right below it. Top 2. Consistent is the key word for Final Destination 2, and that's why I love it so much. It's so entertaining. Again, like I said, the practical effects mixed with the creativity of the kills. Fun characters, fun gimmick with the pregnant lady where if she survives long enough to give birth, can her baby thwart off death's plan? Can new life mess up the pattern for the remainder of our characters? Everything, just like I said, perfect blend. All that put together is why I think Final Destination 2 is the strongest installment in the franchise, quite easily. Okay, y'all, it's 3:30 in the morning. We have finally completed the whole franchise ranking. Let me know if you agree with my list. Let me know if you think it's absolute dog shit. What takes are based, what takes are just cringe. I've just seen the new horror film Bring Her Back, so expect a review on that ASAP. Also, maybe I'll do a tier list ranking of each individual kill in the whole series of the Final Destination movies. Maybe that could be a live stream, I'm not sure, but expect the Bring Her Back review ASAP. Also, as we are finally wrapping up the first half of 2025, expect a big video on the best and the worst films of the year so far. In that video, I'll be going over so many movies you've definitely heard about, movies you may have not have heard about. That will most likely be my next video to upload after I upload the Bring Her Back review. Expect that video shortly. Ladies and gentlemen, the goal is to reach 1,000 subs by summertime. It is summertime, but don't worry. What do you do when you fail a goal? You simply move the goalposts. So now, ladies and gentlemen, we're trying to hit 1K subs before the end of summertime. So please help me out. Please subscribe. But as always, I am forever grateful to whoever has subscribed or just enjoyed the video. Also, make sure you hit the notification bell because you never know when I'm gonna upload. My schedule is just so inconsistent with my job and my big butt girlfriend. I got movies to watch, I got things to do, but I am gonna kill it on this channel this year. Thank you for watching. I will see you at the next one. SZA.